Hello there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am using the My Favorite Things Good Time to Wine card kit. The kit itself is no longer available, but all of the supplies are, and I will have those listed down below. So I have a piece of Neenah cardstock that I have trimmed down to 4 inches by 5 1/4, and I am using the My Favorite Things typewriter text background stamp along with some aged mahogany distress oxide ink, and I'm just kind of putting that all over the background, and then I am going to just stamp bits of that down all over that background. All I want is a little bit of visual texture on the background because I'm going to do even more to it. I don't want it to be perfect. It doesn't need to be. This is just to add, like I said, a little bit of visual background or visual texture. Now I'm grabbing the My Favorite Things Radiating Rays stencil, and I'm going to take that panel that I had just been working on, and I'm going to take some washi tape, and I'm just going to tape that down on the back. I plan to do add a little bit more texture using some texture paste, and I don't want that tape to get in the way. So now that that's all taped there, I'm going to use the Wendy Vecchi crackled texture paste. Mine is fairly old. I've had this for a few years, and I can tell that I didn't put the lid on super great. But I learned my lesson, so I got out the chunks that were a little bit dry, and I'm going to salvage what I can from this texture paste. And I'm just using a palette knife, and I am not trying to get a perfect scrape all across that background. I'm taking it from the center, and I am radiating it out, and it doesn't need to go all the way to the edge. I don't want it to, in fact. I just want this to be kind of messy. So I will now peel off the stencil, and then I'm going to take that right to the water and get that cleaned off, because if you don't, it'll definitely be difficult to get off of your stencil and your palette knife later. So I'll set that off to the side, and I will let that dry. For my card base, I am going to be using some electric red that came in that kit, and that's from My Favorite Things. And I just trimmed that down to 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and I will score that later. And I'm using the wine glass die that came in the kit. Once again, I will have all these things listed down below in case you are interested, and I just trimmed those apart. And now I'm pulling out my Sizzix Sidekick along with some heavy vellum because I want my wine glasses to be sort of see-through, kind of like wine glasses would be. And so I've just run that through my Sizzix Sidekick, and then I'm going to take the inside piece and I'm going to run that through, but I'm using some Kansan XL watercolor paper for that. So that way I can color that inside a little bit. I'm going to use the aged mahogany that I was using earlier along with a sponge dauber, a mini ink blending tool. And I am going to just sponge that starting from the bottom, and I'm going to gradually head up so that it has a little bit of a gradation in the color. And now that my background is dry, that did take a little bit of time, and I went ahead and heat set that as well to kind of speed that up because I wanted to keep moving. I was on a bit of a time crunch this morning, so I wanted to make sure I had everything just going with the flow there. I have a piece of black cardstock that I keep on my desk, and that originally was an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock, and I whittled that down to almost nothing. And I'm going to use some Versamark ink, stamp my sentiment, and that sentiment comes from the Good Time to Wine stamp set. And I'm going to use some white fine detail embossing powder over the top of that. And then I will heat that till that is melted. So it's no longer shiny, or it will be shiny. It's no longer granulated. And then I'll take my card base and I will score that at 5 1/2 inches to make it a top folding A2 size card. And then I'll go ahead and start assembling my card. I'll use liquid glue because I want to make sure that this panel stays down. And then I'll even set that off to the side to dry by sticking it under a few stamp blocks. And then I'll start assembling my side panel. I love my Xyron sticker maker. I haven't used it recently, but this was perfect for the heavy vellum because as we all know, one of the things with vellum is when you try to use adhesive, it will show through whatever adhesive you use. So I decided to use my Xyron sticker maker. It fit in there just perfectly. It was just meant to be a marriage made in heaven. And I flipped that through, and then I used my bone folder to make sure that it was very well burnished into the sticker. And so now I have a wine glass sticker. Is that not the coolest? And a neat thing about that Xyron sticker maker is that, it's not completely adhered down until you start pushing down. So I was able to manipulate that a little bit until I had it exactly where I wanted. And as you can see, you cannot see the adhesive through that vellum, which is great. And then I just used the liquid adhesive to insert my inside piece. And now I'm going to start adhering that to the card base itself. And I'll use that liquid glue again because I want to make sure that that stays put. There is some texture, obviously, on that background, and I don't want that going anywhere. So a tape runner wouldn't have worked. Liquid glue was the best bet. Or foam tape would have worked as well, but then I would have added a lot of dimension. And I wanted this to be as male-friendly as I could. And then I backed my sentiment with some foam tape, and I'm using my T-ruler to make sure that that is on there good and straight. I am learning. It's working too. And then that is actually going to finish off this first card for this kit. So I really ended up liking how that turned out. Card number 2, I'm going to start off with some of that primitive cream cardstock that came in the kit, and I'm going to run that through my Big Shot using the Blueprint Sketch 29. And I also ran some of the Coral Crush through using the Wonky Circle Stitch die. And I'm going to take some of that leftover Coral Crush as my card base, and I'm going to score that at 4 1/4 inches. That'll be a side folding A2 size card. I trimmed down some of the gold cardstock that came in the kit, and I'm going to show you a little trick. I know this is nothing new, but you really don't want to waste that. There's only one 8.5 by 11 piece of that cardstock, so I went ahead and took what I wanted from the gold, which I wanted the Cheers die that came as a free with 60, and I stuck that in the middle of that card panel that I trimmed down, and then I used 2 of the bases, and now I can adhere my cream cardstock to that base, and I will have not let any of that go to any waste. So I love how this ends up working out. I have some of that gold peeking around my card panel, and then I also was able to use the center. So I know that's nothing new, but it always makes my heart happy when I can use what I've got. So then I will go ahead and adhere that down to my card base, and I am ready to start making things happen. The next thing I did was run that wine glass die through my Big Shot twice on that same primitive cream cardstock, and I'm going to start adhering everything to my card base once I've figured out the placement of how I want stuff. So I'll take that wonky circle that I cut out of that Coral Crush, and I will use some liquid adhesive, and then I'm going to adhere that down to my card base. And then the next thing I will do is I will start grabbing my wine glasses, and I'm going to figure out how I want those. So they are going to end up hanging off the edge, which is fine. I'll just trim those down, and then I will use that liquid glue, and I will adhere those to my card base, just like that. And then I'm going to take the other one, and I'm going to figure out where I need to snip off the end of it as well. I end up not trimming off as much as I should have for the start, but it wasn't a big deal. I used the liquid glue, and I adhered that down to my card base, and then you can see I do have a little bit hanging off, so I just pick that up and I snip that piece off as well. And then I will use that liquid glue, and I will adhere my gold panels for the insides of my wine glasses onto the insides of the dies. And when I have those down where I want them, then I will use that same liquid glue on my Cheers die. I think this die is so pretty. I love the font on it, and it's so big. It goes across the whole front of that A2 card, which is beautiful. All on its own, it makes a really great statement. And so I'm just making sure that I cover that pretty well. And then I'll use my reverse tweezers to pick it up, and then I will adhere that down to my card base. For a final bit of embellishment, I end up grabbing some Pretty Pink Posh 4mm metallic rose gold sequins, and I'm just taking that liquid glue and putting little dots wherever I want them, and then I'm going to use my crystal katana along with my reverse tweezers to make sure that I can get those put in their place. I thought those little 4mm worked out beautifully, and they matched really well with the Coral Crush cardstock. And once I've got that all figured out, that will finish off card number 2. For card number 3, I plan to do some ink blending, so I have a piece of cardstock that is Kansan XL watercolor paper that I have trimmed down to 4 inches by 5 1/4, and I am using some seedless preserves along with my mini ink blending tool, And the plan here was to ombre the color. So I wanted it to be dark at the bottom and work its way up to light and white at the top. And I've grabbed some Dusty Concord, which I recently got for Christmas, and I do have a video planned for that one. I just don't have it edited yet, so when I get that done, I will have that up. It's just Christmas stuff that I got. But I'm just dragging that color up, and I'm trying to blend it out and make it nice and soft, and blend the two colors, the Seedless Preserves and the Dusty Concord, together so they look fairly seamless. And when I have the blend that I would like, I'm going to put that off to the side, clean off my glass mat, and then I'm going to take my distress sprayer and just flick water onto it. I didn't want a full-on spray, I just wanted to flick some water onto that. I let that sit for a second, and then I grab my micropore cloth and I wipe up the water that's there. And I love how that turned out. I know this is nothing new, this has been around for a while, but I love that look. I used some washi tape, and I did stick it on my pants first, and then I went ahead and I taped down the inside because I'm planning to make this a shaker card as well. And I stuck it to the top, and everything was dry. And then I ran this through my die cutting machine, and wouldn't you know it, I tore the paper. You can't really see it here on the video, but it is so obvious. And so I tried to fix it, which didn't work. So I thought I'd take my little blending tool and just kind of wipe over the top, just see if I could blend it out. No, it just really emphasized the mistake. And you could probably see it now. And so I'm like thinking, I'm not doing this panel over. I will figure out something. I'll cover it with a sequin or something, but I am not starting this panel over. I take the wine glass die and I run that through my Big Shot machine over some of that Kanzen XL watercolor paper. And then my card base is some of the craft cardstock that came in the kit that I have scored at 5.5 inches to make a top folding A2 size card. I pulled out one of the wine glass shaker pouches, and now I am sticking that down with some liquid glue. I'm just putting that on the back side, and then I am going to stick the wine glass pouch on there as well. These are so neat, and you know, they're very subtle. I think these would still be very easy to mail because they're not very thick at all. And then I take the backing and I trim down a piece of cardstock that would be just slightly bigger, because otherwise that wine glass piece will just fall right into it. And so once that's dried a little bit, the pouch is dried to the panel, I pour some sequins in. And these sequins I think came with a Hero Arts kit. If I can find that sequin mix, I will link it, but I don't know that they make that anymore. And then I'm just going to shimmy. I'm going to shimmy that piece right into it, and I'll flip it over and just make sure that it's in place where it needs to be, and then I will set that off to the side to dry a little bit with some pressure. And I'll use the wine glass die that I had cut out with some liquid glue, and I will stick that over the top. And it's coming along. I'm really liking this, other than the giant mistake that I have right above the wine glass. So I used the liquid glue all over that back panel, and now I will adhere that to my craft cardstock base. And then I'm going to make my sentiment using that black cardstock that I had. And I'm telling you, man, I think I lose probably a fourth of my powder just because I'm clumsy and I dump it all over the place, but whatever. So I've got my powder bag. I'm sticking that over the top of the black cardstock so that there's no static and that the white powder won't stick where it's not supposed to. I ink up my stamp with the Versamark ink, stamp my sentiment down, and then cover that with the white embossing powder. And then I will heat set that off screen and trim that down, and then cover that back part with some foam tape. I will use my T ruler to make sure that I have my sentiment lined up. I'm telling you, I'm really learning, because you know what? It works. You can get it on straight if you do it this way, and it's just like a second longer. And then once that's adhered down, I look and I think, maybe I could put some sequins on top. And then I had this brilliant idea to use my Mono Sand Eraser, and wouldn't you know it, kids, it worked. So that was the saver of the day there. And so that finishes off card number 3. I love how this one turned out. Project number 4 is going to be some wine bottle tags. I end up making 4 of those, and I'm using a die. I don't even remember where or who manufactured this die, but I will link down below to the My Favorite Things one, because I don't know that whoever I got this from even makes that anymore, but I just used what I had. So I cut down some vellum and I cut down some peach Bellini cardstock from the kit. The vellum was not from the kit. And this is the heavyweight vellum that I've been using through this whole time. And I decided to cut out 4 of each of these using the Cheers die that was the free with 60 this month. So I did 4 from the peach Bellini and 4 from the heavyweight cardstock. And then the last 4 pieces of vellum that I had cut down, I cut out the wine glass die 4 separate times. And I just decided it was probably easier to do it this way for assembly line creating, and it ended up being very easy. So this first one, of course, was my trial and error. I started off by using some liquid glue, and this worked out just fine for all 4 of them. And I just covered the back of my Cheers die with that liquid glue, and then I grabbed my reverse tweezers and I flipped it over and I staggered it, so I made it look like it was just kind of off center with the vellum, so it gave it a little bit of extra dimension without adding any dimensional foam or anything. And then I kind of set that off to the side to dry. And I did that with all 4 of the Cheers dies. For the shaker pouch, I grabbed some large gold sequins. I believe these ones were from Simon Says Stamp. And this time around, what I did was I just used some liquid glue and I adhered the pouch, the little wine glass shaker pouch, right over the top of those. But I did something different for the last 3. I ended up taking the vellum piece and I just glued, or I set that down. I didn't glue it down, I set it down. Then I put the sequins on top of that, and then I actually used a very thin creative tape, and that seemed to hold it down really well. I did use the liquid glue all over the vellum for the the first 3 wine glasses, and then I discovered it would have been so much easier if I had just run that through my Xyron sticker maker, and so I ended up doing that for the final one. But for this first one, actually this worked for all 3, I just used the liquid glue on the H, the E, and the R, and that adhered that down to the front of my wine tag. And then that finished this one off. So I will show a picture of the 4 that I made, and I think they all turned out pretty nice. So I'm set. Card number 5 is my final card for this video. And I have a piece of the red hot cardstock that came in the kit that I have cut down to 4 1/4 by 11 inches and scored at 5 1/2 inches to make a top folding A2 size card. And then I'm going to use a doily. I think I got this at the Target dollar spot, but I know that Bo Bunny makes some good ones, and so if I can find those, I will link those down below because I have some Bo Bunny ones as well. But I just grabbed what was available at the time, and it was these, I believe, like I said, Target dollar spot that I may have gotten last year around Valentine's Day. So I'm just using some liquid glue, and I'm not putting it all over the back, just the top and the bottom, more centered in the middle, because I knew that I was going to be trimming off the edges. And so once that's on there, I will grab my scissors. These are my Cutter Bee scissors, and I will trim down the sides. And then I'll be ready to start making the rest of the card. So I took the primitive cream cardstock and I ran that through my Big Shot using the wine glass die 2 times. And then I'm using just a pick to pull those out of the die because sometimes they get stuck. I have a piece of craft cardstock that I have trimmed down, and I'm going to use my Favorite Things In and Out Stitch rectangle stacks, one of the sizes. It fits through my Sizzix Sidekick beautifully, and that's the size I wanted. So I will start adhering that with some liquid glue here in a second. After I grab my fired brick, this is the Distress Oxide, no, this is Barn Door, and I'm doing like I did in on a previous card. I'm starting at the bottom and I'm kind of ombreing that up. So here's where I'll take the liquid glue. I will adhere down that rectangular panel, and then I kind of set that off to the side a little bit. I wanted some visual appeal, and you'll see here what I mean by that. But I'm going to adhere my wine glasses down, and then I'll take their insides and I will adhere those as well. And I'm just overlapping these just a little bit, almost to look like they're clinking. And then I'll take the middle and I will do the exact same thing with it as well. I love this color palette. I thought it was really pretty. So now I need a sentiment, and this is my final piece of that black cardstock that I've been using for a while. And I'm going to do the same thing I've done with the rest of them. Often when I make cards, I like for them to kind of be a little bit similar in case I decide I want to package them up as a gift set and give those out as a gift. So I take that black cardstock, use my Versamark ink to stamp my sentiment down, then I heat set that, and then now I'm using my T ruler after I've trimmed all that down, and I'm adhering the sentiment. And here's where I'm talking about the visual appeal. So the sentiment is more off to the right, where the images are more upper left. And for a final bit of embellishment on this card, I will take some Ebony Black Nouveau drops, and I'm just going to put a few of those all over the background. And then I will flatten those out a little bit by just hitting the card against my table. And when I'm done with that, that will finish off card number 5. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 5 cards that I made today using this kit. Once again, I'll have everything listed down below that I did use. I would love to know which one of these cards was your favorite. And if you like this video, hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. I have a lot of things planned for this upcoming year. So as always, guys, I do appreciate you watching my videos, liking and subscribing. And as always, thank you for stopping by. Bye, guys.